The firelight from the campfire flickered across the faces of the soldiers. Helmets and armor had been put aside tonight. The enemy was far away yet again. They could travel through this underbrush, through the forest, with such speed. A great body such as this had a hard time keeping up. But the soldiers, they were not disappointed. This was not their war, and few of them had ever seen battle before. The quiet intensity of the night was broken by the cackling of the fire, the sipping of mead, and the ever-present sound of the insects in the darkness and the small creatures of the night. A man in a cloak comes up to the other soldiers, and a couple of them look up at him and part ways, and he sits himself down by the campfire, takes his leather helmet off and places it in front of him. So, you boys seen any combat yet?
No, sir. Just drive to the front.
I didn't think so. You all look pretty young. I swear I've got a son back at home your age.
Been out here long?
Oh, well, you know, this war's just begun. But I've fought in others. I've fought these people before.
Really?
The spirit people, they call them. At least that's what they used to call them.
Is that why they can move so fast through the brush? They say they can travel through the trees themselves.
There are many stories about the spirit people. Many stories. Few have seen them with their own eyes. So many dead. But I've seen them. I've seen them.
What do they look like?
What do they look like? They are wild people. Their skin, it's like leather. He pats his helmet. It's dark from the sun that tans them. They run around with barely any clothing on. Before they go to battle, they mark themselves with paint, reds and blues, and they cover themselves. You know why?
Why?
It's said that before battle, they invite dark spirits into their bodies, let them possess them, and that they draw these markings on themselves to cage the spirits in their flesh. And when they're interrupted, when the markings are destroyed, the demon comes out and is loosed on the battlefield, where it can ravage the opponents, where it can ravage soldiers like you.
Does this actually happen? Have you seen it happen?
I've seen it. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen them and heard their howl on the battlefield. I remember once, a place full of mist. We never knew where they came from. They would strike each side, another side, and we could hear their voices echoing in that watery air. So many men died that day. They say the battle can't be won.
If that was the case, why did they send us off to war?
Why, indeed. I suspect it's a fool's errand. But it's not the first one I've been on, and nor will it be the last.
Think the church had something to do with it?
Oh, certainly. They fear the spirit people, you know. They fear what they bring.
I fear him too, but I'd just leave well enough alone if it was up to me.
They can't, though. They can't.
The church or the spirit people?
The church. The spirit people are too strong. You see, their weapons are not like ours. Not things of steel. No, they forge their weapons from words, from voice. They're unstoppable, it is said, and I have seen the work that they can do. Their spirit carries through men like us and cuts them down.
Well, I heard the old saying, pen is mightier than a sword. Takes it to a whole new level, I guess.
Something like that. You'll see it, soldier. You'll see it. Or you won't. Maybe you'll never see it. If I were you, though, I'd be worried. I'm worried. I've fought him before. I'm scared.
But you're still alive, at least.
Yeah, but here's a secret. I'm out of here tonight. No more. Not this.
You gonna desert?
Yeah. There's others that've done it before. Hell, you remember last week? 300 men gone in the middle of the night.
Commander told me they got taken.
He would say that, wouldn't he?
I suppose so.
And we can't know. Maybe they were taken. Those people, they're like wolves. But me, I'm taking my chance. I'm taking my chance, boys.
Good luck out there, then.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your fire, your time. He picks up his helmet and puts it back on. See you later, boys. Maybe. Walks off into the darkness. The scene changes now. And it's morning. The commander gazes off at the empty tents in the south quarter of the camp. The quartermaster by his side. Oh, another 150 last night, sir. Damn it! Damn it all! Those bastards. Much of the jungle are flatlands. But in places, valleys and ridges poke up out of the tree line. This is one such ridge, a crumbling white stone. At its peak, beside the cliff face, there is a figure standing, looking out over the jungle. The sound of running water can be heard. And there is a slight fog that rises up. The sun is hot today, though. The fog burns away very quickly. The source must be near. And the man's tanned skin is reflecting the hot sunlight. He's sweating. He is muscular and lithe. In his 40s, perhaps, but a very handsome man. His hair is shoulder length and black. His nose is a little long, but is sharp. And his eyes are a deep blue. And they're inward focused, even as he stares out at the jungle. There are thoughts happening there. He takes a deep breath. His eyes close. And then he leans forward and he topples from the cliff face, falling, disappearing down over the cliff's edge. A moment later, he is diving, a perfect dive into the pool of the deep pool of water down below the watering hole of the stream that runs through. He dives down 12, 15 feet before coming back up to surface. And as he comes out of the water, he is almost spit out and does a leap into the air and breathes in again before engaging in an easy breaststroke towards the cliffside again. There's an old rope that hangs down the cliff there, and he easily reaches up with one arm and begins to pull himself, bracing on the cliff's edge as he climbs towards the ridge again, his muscles working smoothly in his climb. He reaches the cliff
And he plants one hand and then the other, pushing himself up, raising one leg and climbing up onto the ridge, once again in the brightness of the sun, the hot sun. He rolls his shoulders from the climb and looks up. There is a man standing there, waiting for him. A little bit further down the ridge, there are a handful of soldiers, a platoon, looking around nervously. Their guns are held in hand and loaded. You are...
Good to see you, Colonel.
You're the commander here.
General Darius.
Oh, General Darius.
Yes.
I knew that...
They call me Commander, that's fine.
Reporting, sir.
Almeda, I presume.
Yes, Colonel Almeda, sir. I knew I was supposed to report. I didn't know where your home camp was.
The man, his eyes travel up and down the mostly naked Almeda. Where's your uniform?
I've got it stashed just about a half league from here. I can bring it back in no time.
Do so.
Almeda turns and he's facing out over the cliff's edge again, and his eyes close for a second, and the wind suddenly picks up. It blows through the colonel's hair, his black hair whipping, and the commander squints against it for a moment. Then the colonel is once again, Almeda is once again stepping out over the cliff's face, but this time he is literally buoyed up by the wind, and his arms spread as he is lifted into the air. The wind accelerates, and he is pulled swiftly out over the tree line, sailing as if he has wings. It is barely any time at all before the same man is seen returning. He looks somehow much less striking, much more like a tame dog, as he returns clad in his uniform. The wind's carrying him to settle back down, his heavy boots settling on the stone and earth of the cliffside with a thump. Yes, sir, Commander. I apologize. Yes, sir, Commander. I apologize for the breach in etiquette and all that.
I'm not sure how things were done in your previous units, Almeda, but you'll find that under my command, we act accordingly. We follow the rules. We follow the niceties of war. We pay attention to what the authorities tell us. Now, Almeda, I will not take any insubordination from you or any other of my men, and I expect that you will set an example worthy of a soldier.
Yes, sir. I fully intend to set an example for the men.
The commander looks back over the men. They're all kind of watching this exchange uneasily. All right, then.
Is there specific duties that you wish to assign me at this time?
I should think not.
Well, very well then. I appreciate your visitation, and I look forward to continuing my operations, sir.
Well said, Almeda. Well said. Dismissed.
The commander turns and walks away down the cliffside. Almeda watches him go for a moment, his eyes casting over the still frightened-looking soldiers. They are trying to stand at attention, but their gaze keeps drifting over to Almeda on the cliffside, and he watches them for a moment. And then he turns, glancing once back over, and he begins to take his dress shirt off once again, and slip his boots off his ankles. The commander looks back over at him one more time, tenses for a moment, but as he watches just a moment longer, turns back around to go and walks down the hill. The last thing he hears is another splash.
The commander watches as the form of Almeda begins to take off his uniform again, and he turns aside, begins striding back towards the column of troops, his scribe coming up to him as he does so.
Eyes up front! Eyes up front! Sorry, Commander, they're a little restless.
I can see that.
I've got our route planned back for the return journey. If we have any watchers, we'll keep them on our toes.
Good man. Good man, Stevens.
Yes, sir.
Come, let us talk.
The two begin to walk. The troops file in behind them, but the two are some distance ahead, out of earshot. Sir, that Colonel, he gave you a hard time.
For a colonel.
Why do you let him stay? And I don't understand. He sets a example for the troops. Shouldn't he be in camp?
The commander lowers his voice. If I were to have told him any task, I am almost certain he would have refused. And for the man to see such a thing, it cannot be. That one, I have heard of him before. I don't know if you have, Stevens. Almeda.
Almeda.
The name is not unfamiliar to me. In previous commands, he has proved himself a valuable soldier, a great tool in the Empire's war. But he is not to be trifled with. He has a temper. He has a will of his own. And if we are to use him effectively, I'm afraid it must be on his terms.
It seems so far out from camp. He could get into any kind of trouble out here.
He's a dragon.
A dragon?
A dragon. Elite member of this army. He has at his command, well, you saw it, traveling on the winds like that. Does a normal man do that?
It reminds me of the stories of the witchcraft of the people in the jungle.
Sometimes I worry that they're not so different. The witchcraft of the Empire and the witchcraft of these jungle natives.
The scribe looks around for a moment, see if there's anyone overheard that. That's not something to be said very loud, Commander.
No, it is not, and I share it just with you, Stevens.
Yes, sir, you know my loyalty.
I do. You're a good man.
The two are approaching the camp of soldiers now. It's not so far away. And they're coming out of the tree line. All of the trees in the clearing here in this area here have been cut down or burnt, so that there's a wide open space full of tents and encampments and supplies. Sir, shall I give the order?
Yes.
All right, y'all. Troops, get back to your stations now. Go see your immediate officers for next assignments. The battalion, the guard squadron goes about their way. It's striking how nervous they are, sir, even just going out on a short expedition into the jungle. It's like they think that the enemy's around every tree.
There are whispers amongst the camp that I would do away with. Here, I have a task for you, Stevens.
Huh.
The
two of them are approaching the commander's tent now.
There are those who fear the enemy more than death. They must meet death first.
You talk of the deserters, sir?
Yes.
That is,
We must make an example. I don't care how many. An example must be made, or the men will continue to desert.
Yes, sir. I will round up some examples for you, sir.
Yes.
The two of them are pushing through the tent.
And the commander pushes through, and there, standing unexpectedly within his own space, and the members of the church.
Hi, Theocrat.
Please, Stevens.
Shall I?
You should leave.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sirs.
Stevens, I am not to be interrupted.
Yes, sir. I will pass it along.
I did not expect you to be here.
General? No. I had a thought. Part of why I came here. I often find myself caught up in little thoughts and flights of fancy that take me to all corners of the globe. The thought is that our military is renowned throughout the world for the number of records we break, for the number of battles we win, for the military inventions we create. However, General, I'm not entirely sure a number of desertions is a record you should be looking to break.
I assure you, it is not something I have been striving for. It is a most unfortunate side effect of the propaganda campaign these savages have successfully managed against the might of the Empire.
Propaganda? You think they're even capable of pronouncing the word? These brutal savages don't even know what propaganda means.
Then explain to people at home. Don't think I haven't heard. Out here in the territories, certain factions in our capital, no less, professing to the beauty of these savages' lifestyle. If that's not propaganda, then I don't know what is, and maybe I never will, for I'm just a soldier.
There are always heretics in every age, and I can guarantee you, anything you hear about these savages, it even sounds remote bit possible, is just the wild delusions of bored aristocrats who think they can get away with
I need not be convinced of this. I know this all too well. I have killed them with my own hands. I know that their guttural tongue is so different from our own, but the men, they do not know this. They do not believe. They need something to believe in, and I try to provide. But authority can only do so much on its own.
Then look to a higher authority.
I do! I do!
You know, one of the central facets of our church is the purifying light of flame. I think that if you were to reintroduce your troops to the purifying light, let's say by burning the deserters as heretics.
Burning is a death not fit for a soldier.
They're not soldiers. Not when they desert. They become heretics, enemies of the state, no better than the brutal savages we are here to kill.
Yes, sir, I see that.
And in a way, you're doing them a favor. The purifying light of the flame cleanses their souls, perhaps giving them a better chance in the next life.
Yes. I will do as you say. I have one of my men rounding up deserters now. I will make it known what punishment they shall face.
Good. And I don't think it's just your troops that get this message. We should send a similar message to these savages.
What do you mean?
I'm just saying that perhaps if we introduce their villages, their people, prisoners we capture, their high priest especially, and introduce them to the purifying flame as well, perhaps they will see the futility of continuing to resist the Empire, continuing to resist our God. Just an idle thought.
The commander looks up at the official, and it's plain to see that his eyes want to say no. This is not how honorable men act, but his mouth moves with different words. Yes, I will do as you say. I will make an example of any of their villages I come across, any of their men.
Good. You're doing God's work. Now I must go and continue God's work as well. I have other generals to discuss such similar matters with. And then I must depart back home, deal with the heretics on the home turf.
Yes, Your Eminence. It has been an honor to have you here in my tent.
The honor was all mine, General. Good day.
The general, he turns to a map spread on a makeshift table there in the center of his tent. And he pulls out his dagger and he stares at it and stabs it down. This is not war! Stevens, he says. Leaves the tent.
Almeda is standing on the cliffside looking out over the jungle. It is nighttime. The stars are visible up above. It is not totally dark, though. There is flickering light, and he looks down, and he sees that he holds a torch in his hand. He raises it up, looks at it, and looks out in the jungle again. He hears the crunch of a branch snapping behind him, and he turns and he looks over his shoulder. And there, at the bottom of where the ridge begins, at the tree line, he sees a soldier come out of the tree line, dressed up in the camouflage uniform. He steps out and looks up. He has his gun slung over his back. He's staring up at Almeda. Almeda turns back around, his eyes wide, looking out over the jungle. But he has a sense again. There's a sound of movement behind him, and he turns and he looks, and he sees another 3 soldiers come out of the jungle, and they're standing at the bottom of the ridge. And then more emerge like shadows from the jungle, and they form a semicircle there, and he can see the movement behind them. There's more behind. You can see 12 of them forming a semicircle at the bottom of the ridge, and behind them a whole mass of shadows teeming, so alive, watching him, moving. And the ones that he can actually see, all of their eyes are fixed on him, up on the ridge, holding the torch. He wants to call out to them, "What? What do you want from me? What?" But he turns and looks back out of the jungle again, and the jungle is gone, the cliff is gone. He's standing there, but before him is a village. He can make out the architecture of the spirit people. They're thatched and woven homes, semi-permanent, very, very dry and flammable. Holds the torch, and the soldiers are all watching him there. He looks at the torch and flashes into his mind. He can see the image of villages in flames. He can hear screams. He holds the torch. He drops it, and he comes awake. He opens up, unties quickly the flap on his tent. And he crawls out into the open air. He's camped in the jungle, alone, away from the encampment of the soldiers, alone. He crawls out into the air of the jungle, and he shakes his head, and he rubs. Oh! I paid a heavy price, he thinks. Almeda has freedom now. They don't mess with him anymore. He has proven his worth to the Empire. And so, like a prize stallion, he is given his free range. They know he will return. He is a well-bred war horse, and they know it. They give him his leash. They let him wander. They let him camp away. They occasional stern talkings too about his unconventional behavior. But they all know better than to fuck with the dragon Almeda. Why do they know that? Why do the higher-ups know that? Well, they know what he does to his enemies, don't they? They know what he does to those who go into battle against him. They've heard the story. Some of them saw it, like he did. Ah! He calls out, and his cry, his howl, echoes through the jungle. Oh, he has been here a long time, he has. He remembers back the first war. He was young then, but they needed all the help they could get. especially when things started turning sour. And, well, Almeda was one of the few, one of the proud, one of the ones with the gift. Barely of age, but he had graduated from the academy. He had all the powers they wanted. His brothers and his sisters, other graduates, they had dropped dead like flies. Even though they had brought all the sorcery of the Empire at their disposal, they couldn't survive in the jungle, not against that enemy. But Almeda, he'd been lucky, blessed. He'd lived, and he'd lived, and he'd lived, and over time he had learned enough to live in that jungle. He had covered the retreat. He had filled smokescreen after smokescreen, burning village after burning village. And maybe it had been worth it when his countrymen were on the run, when the savages, as they called them, were coming down on them with bloody intent, with greater numbers, with knowledge of the terrain. Almeda tried to justify it to himself, what he had done. It had been to protect, to help, to save lives. But the nightmares kept coming. He took a deep breath. It was always harder when he got riled up like this. Always harder to bring the focus necessary. But the wind rose in his hair. His black, loose hair streamed off. He raised his hands to the sides and he rose up off the ground. His clothes flapping in the wind that he called. They carried him up over the trees, and he began to sail there through the jungle. There was a drizzle now, and it landed on his hair, on his face, on his neck. And as he sailed, he looked down at the jungle below. He scanned it, as he always did on these flights. Watched down below. Maybe if he was a good soldier, he'd be looking for enemies, enemy combatants, looking for outposts. A scout like Almeda would be very valuable indeed, but that wasn't what he looked for. He didn't quite know what he looked for, but it wasn't that. He flew out like this almost every night when the dreams woke him, when he couldn't get to sleep sometimes, when he could hear the soldiers, their encampment, their raucous talk, their boasts, their fears, when he heard the deserters creeping past him in the night, creeping past his camp. It all was too much, and he would fly over the jungle. He would breathe with the focus of the winds, and he would be carried far away. It may have been dangerous even for him. He knew that there were among the enemies those with powers that he hadn't met yet, that he didn't know. And if they saw him there, the symbol that he was, the enemy of their people, could they strike him down? But better free than in that tent with the voices of the soldiers, with their fears, their anxieties, their anger pounding down on him. Better here than there with those dreams. So he breathed in the silence and the sounds of the animals, the birds, the night birds, the sound of the wind in his ears, pounding in on him. And he scanned the jungle below. And he didn't find what he was looking for. He never found what he was looking for. But he did find the spot that he had visited so many times, the spot that he loved, and he settled down there, his clothes already coming off before he landed. And he stepped lightly down onto the slick rock, his balance impeccable as always, was one foot then the other. And soon his pants were off and his shirt was off, and he was slipping in to the hot water of the spring there that bubbled up from the earth. No one had ever come here. He'd seen animals before, but it was his own little oasis, a place where the tension of the dreams and of the kowtowing and of the games and The nightmares, they all could ease away. His muscles would relax in the water. So he settled back down, put his head back, and he breathed in freedom, if only for a moment. Thought about power. He thought about power there in that spring. It was a thought that came to him often. People had been talking to Almeda about power since the day he was 9 years old and had been identified as a carrier of the gift, power. They didn't speak of almost anything else in the years he spent at the academy. Power. When he came to fight their wars for them, there was the power of the enemy and the power of their soldiers and the power and might of the empire and the failing power of a dream. And then when he, against all odds, saved those soldiers, saved those battalions, which by all rights were doomed, they would never have made the shore. Well, again, they spoke of power, and of the power of a dragon of the empire. Unique power. And what did it all mean, he thought? What did that mean? As he lay there in the dark, in the hot spring, with a momentary freedom from the leash of his masters. He sat up suddenly. There was no sound, but he sat up and his eyes were wide. It was very dark there in the canyon in which the hot spring bubbled. The starlight barely cast down. There was no sound. But he peered around and he slowly stood, his body naked in the shadows, poised in that spring. "I know you're there," he said. "I know you're there." And he felt the presence of a formidable force. He could tell when he met someone what they were, what strength they carried. He knew about power. The commander, for example, the newly arrived leader of the invasion, he had a power in him, true, but he was no match for Almeda. This presence, on the other hand, it had not in any recent times been like this, been like that. The feeling when one wades into the ocean, when one feels the undertow and wonders for a moment whether it is possible even for a great swimmer to be swept away. That was what this was like, this strange and unfamiliar ocean lapping against him. It was exhilarating. Exhilarating fear, excitement. Who was this? Was it another sorcerer from the academy back home? He had trained one before they recalled him. She reminded him of her, Cassandra, one of his apprentices. She had been great. If she wasn't killed in this war, wherever she had been stationed, she would be great. But this was not her. It was a different vintage, more stranger, more exotic, more mature. She stepped out of the shadows then, and he could barely make out her shape there. It was still not well lit. A woman. And she was as naked as him, and her skin was dark. And on it were inscribed tattoos that lit up softly in the subdued starlight. She was one of the spirit people, and she stared at him piercingly. And all the stories of their witches and their shamans came to him as he trembled in the hot spring, ever so slightly. But he knew she could feel his fear. Of course she could feel it. He could feel her. He knew she could see him in a way that he had not been seen in a very long time. So he was naked before her. And so he felt the nightmares and the sins of his past and his shame at his imprisonment at the hands of his masters. All of this surged to the surface as she looked at him, just peered at him. He knew that she could see every one of these things. And again, power came to his mind. Power. It means very little as she looks into me, he thought. What could he do? He thought about running. That thought, too, could not be hidden. He thought about running from her then, summoning up the winds and leaping into the sky, here faced with a priestess of their people. But instead, he inhaled. He looked at her. She peered back at him, then she walked forward and she said nothing. What do you want? He said. What are you here for? Is this a time of battle? He said. He lowered into a fighting stance, just a little bit, just prepared. She stepped forward and she stood at the end of the hot springs, and he could see the scorn that came into her eyes. No, he said, no, I am sorry. I will do you no harm. I don't know what to say. I've never... She stepped one foot into the spring and then the other and came down into the water, still looking at him, and he felt her presence in his mind, and he felt her intentions. He could hear her words speak to him even though they were not of his tongue. What are you doing here, snake of the empire? Came the voice. I'm just trying to rest, he said. I'm resting. I mean, no harm. No harm, came the voice. What harms have you already committed? What more will you do? I could have us down upon you in a moment, she said with a thought, and you would not escape this canyon. You think perhaps your strength would avail you, but it would not. You are not at home, snake. Well, he said, out loud, if this is to be such an end, then it will be the end. But I think you haven't come for that, he said. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we? You understand very little of those you do battle with, snake, came the voice. You understand very little. You think you have found our ways. You think you know us because you can feel movements of our warriors with your mind. But you do not know our ways. You do not know how we move in the depths of the jungle at night. You do not know what every action means to us. I see you, soldier, and I think you do not even know what you do or why you do it. Your mind is like a child's mind, a mistreated and frightened child. He felt angry then. He felt the embarrassment and anger building up inside of him. Your people do harms against mine, he said. You have butchered men. You have tortured those you have captured. I've known some of them. You have earned our homeland, came the voice booming in his mind. You were not invited here. None of you were. You are invaders to our homes. You kill our children. You rape our women. Yes, it has happened. All of these things have happened, as you well know, snake. No, I will not kill you tonight, but not because I wish to spare an enemy of my people. I will not kill you tonight because our most ancient and sacred ways, which I do not expect you to understand, say that you are lucky to have chosen a place that I will not kill you tonight. However, that doesn't mean that your blasphemy will be further permitted. I highly suggest you remove yourself immediately. He could feel all the ways that if he did not obey her now, it would come back to haunt him. He didn't know whether he would be allowed to survive his journey home. So he rose as quickly as possible, stumbling. As he reached for them, he gathered his clothing, and taking one deep breath, he leapt into the air, the wind coming to snatch him from the valley, from the canyon, before he could fall back to the ground. And he sailed away, clothes clutched to his chest, like a child with a stuffed animal, and was carried back home, back to his tent, within earshot of the encampment of soldiers with their boasts and their fears and their anger. So he lay back down within the tent, still naked, tying the flap shut, and he lay his head back onto his bedroll. Took a deep breath. He trembled. The dragon Almeda trembled there that night.
Mornings in the soldiers' encampment was a slow thing. The jungle was warm, but the nights were just cold enough to make the soldiers shiver in their bedrolls. Perhaps from the cold, perhaps from fear, or the droning of the insects outside that never seemed to cease. In the mornings, they put themselves to labor, emptying the latrines, gathering their armaments, and preparing for a day's travel, perhaps. If they were lucky, they might move again today. Many of the soldiers had become uneasy in this place, in this valley. But this morning was punctuated by different sounds. There was the cackling of a great bonfire there in the center of the encampment. Several men stood in a line, a rope tying each one to the next behind him, and their hands together, and their feet the same, each one bound to the man behind him. And a man with a red face and dirt smudged over his cheeks, and eyes that pleaded but refused to cry, stared up at the general as he overlooked them. They could feel the crackling, the heat of the fire behind them, and the general could feel it bathing his face as he stared at the men and he stared at the fire. And he turned around to the soldiers gathered behind him. These men are no longer soldiers of the Empire. They have thrown away their honor, cast it down like the swords that they left in the encampment last night. These men are traitors. Traitors to everything we know, to the honor that we hold inside of us, to the greatness and the glory of the Empire. We know the traitors are punished with death. But on such an important occasion as this war, as the battle, we move to face. Extra precautions must be taken. That this filth, that this disease does not spread amongst you all. I know that you have felt it, that you have heard the words, and I am confident that you will move forward with the unit, with the army, as His Holiness commands. These men will burn. One of the men, "No, my lord, please! Please!" But his pleas fall on deaf ears, and the general does not turn around. "For they are no longer men of the Empire. They are beasts, savages like those out there in the jungle, and they will die like beasts. They will die like savages. Let it be known, amongst all of you, and any man you should meet, that the same fate will be met by anyone else who seeks to leave their post unduly." Look at these men. Look into their faces. Their fate could be yours, but only if you refuse to honor the Empire. He turns to his side to another soldier. "Burn them!" And then strides off of the platform on which he had stood. "No!" screams the man again, and he is the first to be cut from his ties, and the commander cannot bear to see, and he turns his eyes as he hears the screaming behind him. And he travels into his tent. Stevens coming to his side. "Summon Almeda," he says as he pushes open the flap, but there, standing inside...
You wanted to see me.
He motions to Stevens, and Stevens bows and leaves.
Please, General, sit down. I've prepared some tea for both of us.
All right. Please.
It's a little hot.
You
it
sit
might scorch
first.
your tongue.
Sit down, soldier!
Almeda doesn't move at all when the hand pushes him. And a moment later, he sits. You summoned me, General?
Yes! Yes, I summoned you.
Well?
There is a task for you, Almeda. You work alone, do you not? This is your way?
Yes, General.
You prefer it. You prefer it like that, do you not?
It depends who I have to work with. In these circumstances, it's probably best, yes.
Yes, it probably is. I would send another with you, but I'm not sure that anyone could keep pace.
What is it that you wish me to do?
There is a village of the savages. Do not ask me how I know where it is. It lies not far to the south here. The army will be marching past it. We will not pay heed to them. We have no time for such things. The front must move forward. The other commanders, they are anxious for battle. But you will visit that village, Almeda. Do you know why?
Why don't you tell me? Sir.
You're going to burn it down, Almeda. You're going to burn it to the ground until there's nothing but ash left there. Before there was people and song, there will be death. And they will know that when the Empire marches, that we do not play. And that this is not a game. Will you do it?
General, what were you back in the Empire, back home? You were a nobleman?
Son of a nobleman.
Son of a nobleman. First son?
Second.
Second son. Good role then. A military general.
Yes.
You've done quite well for yourself. My father was a miner.
I am familiar with him.
Yes, he practically a slave, before they found me. It's interesting, isn't it? The way that these things play out. I can hear them screaming out there. Do you hear them? I suppose from very young you were taught not to. Son of a miner, he hears screams. He hears them in his own home.
Do not think you know me, Almeda. You do not know me. Perhaps you have known men in my position, or even men of my caliber. You do not know me.
I do not pretend that you and I are brothers. No, we are not. However, we are both soldiers.
We are.
Until we cease to be.
Until
Sir.
we die.
You just told those men that they were soldiers no longer. Why?
They chose their death. They chose their fate.
They chose a dereliction of their duty. Sir?
Yes.
And what is a soldier's duty?
A soldier's duty is to obey.
You believe that?
Yes.
How? How deeply do you believe that? Do you believe it in your dreams?
What if you know of my dreams, Almeda?
I only know of my own. But I see that you will not be swayed, will you? You are set on your course, wherever it takes
The
you.
course has been set before I set foot on it, Almeda.
You are at the helm, General! You are holding the wheel!
You think I am at the helm? Are you at the helm of yourself, man? You've been commanded to kill them before. You know how it is. There is no choice in this, Almeda. There is do or don't. There is do or die.
There are burning soldiers! That's what there are!
And there will be burning savages before the night is out.
Those are your orders, then?
Yes! Yes! As they were given to me, so shall they be given to you.
Well, then I have work to do.
You do.
Sir, he says, rising to his feet.
Thank you for the tea, Almeda, he says. He grabs the cup and throws it onto the ground. Stevens, he calls out. We move tonight.